Republican Benghazi report is Democratic member of the Benghazi Committee, Congressman Adam Schiff, who also serves on the Intelligence Committee. Thank you very much, Congressman, for joining us. Well, your response, you just heard what the chairman said in focusing very intensively on the military and the deployment order and what he says is a failure to deploy.
Well, I think there are a couple of things very notable, both about the report and about what the chairman just said. And part of what's most notable is what he didn't say. And that is, there's nothing new here about Secretary Clinton. And while the chairman tried to make a merit of that, it's not for lack of trying. The committee tried for 2 years to try to find anything on the secretary they could to damage her campaign. And the fact they were unsuccessful is now being trumpeted as demonstration of their good faith. But it's hardly that. The other takeaway, I think, Andrea, is that there's no claim by the chairman that the military could have gotten there in time. So these theories that the military was ordered to stand down by the president or the secretary, the chairman wasn't able to corroborate that in any way.
The Democratic member of the Benghazi Committee, Congressman Adam Schiff, and our apologies for that rude interruption. You were saying that they've spent all of this money and you think that they missed their original target. They are making a virtue of the fact that they think that they did uncover new information about the failure of communication, the failure to respond, about the assumption that the attacks were over, not anticipating the later attack that killed 2 of the other Americans. Do you see no virtue in what they have done?
Well, no, Andrea, I don't. And I think they're trying to make a virtue of the fact that after spending 2 years really trying to go after the secretary, they weren't able to produce anything new. That as a virtue, but it wasn't for lack of trying, and indeed that was the whole purpose of the committee to begin with. So I hardly think they need applause for this. And vis-a-vis the Defense Department, I think what's also notable about this, and I know you asked the chairman about this, and he was very careful in parsing his answer. Once again, the chairman had to conclude that nothing could have been done by the Defense Department to save those lives on the ground. So while there is new granularity and new criticism by the GOP of the Defense Department, nothing really alters those core conclusions of the 8 other investigations. So we paid a very high price, both in years and in taxpayer millions, to reach fundamentally the same conclusions we had before.
Do you think there was too much sensitivity on the part of the State Department to Libyan concerns rather than let's go in, let's try to evacuate? They didn't even have a plan for evacuation.
You know, I think there is certainly criticism to be had of the State Department's preparations, and that was something the Accountability Review Board documented. And in terms of the Defense Department and the State Department response, that was the subject of testimony in the Oversight Committee and the Armed Services Committee years ago in terms of some of the delays and discussion about changing uniforms. But again, the conclusion by General Ham was none of this was interfering with the military response, and because of the distance and the time and the fact that response planes were separated from their crews, this was one of the biggest problems. They just weren't positioned to respond in a timely way. Those problems have subsequently been addressed, in fact, more than a year ago. But nonetheless, the effort to make this sound new is pretty unpersuasive.
Do you think that it's reasonable to have had Ambassador Stevens, trying to make Benghazi a permanent mission, given a security climate where the Brits and everyone else had evacuated? How could you bring Secretary Clinton a month later into that kind of atmosphere?
Well, I think the key thing here is that this is what Ambassador Stevens wanted. This is what people on the ground there wanted. They wanted to see a permanent presence in Benghazi. Ambassador Stevens loved this country. He thought Benghazi was a very important part of the country, given that it was the roots of the revolution against Gaddafi. So this was driven by people on the ground, not something being imposed from above by the State Department. And certainly in hindsight, you can say, did that make sense? But those were the recommendations coming from the people with the most at stake.
Indeed, they had their lives at stake. Adam Schiff, Congressman, thanks very much for being